Hello, my dears. My name is Mariana Lewis. I am an archetypal tarotist, and welcome to my channel. So maybe this is your first time around here, or maybe you've hung out a little bit or followed me on Instagram or on my newsletter or something, and you've heard me say the term archetypal tarot a lot. But I've realized recently that I haven't actually taken the time to explain what is the difference between traditional tarot and archetypal tarot. And so today that's on the agenda. We're going to break down what really is the difference between archetypal tarot and traditional tarot and how we could develop more of an archetypal approach in our work with the cards. And for those of you who have stuck around here a little bit, I know I haven't put out a lot of videos lately, but thanks for sticking around, and I hope to get back on the wagon a little bit. Though slowly, it's been a busy year, a lot has happened. And before we jump in, I want to actually let everybody know that if you are a beginner tarotist and you are interested in an archetypal approach, even if you're just curious about what an archetypal approach looks like, I've just opened the doors to the Foundations of the Tarot workshop. This is my class for the beginner tarotist. We talk about all the things, all the foundations that you need to know about tarot. What is it, the history of it, understanding the mechanisms of it, the different types of cards, covering what all the 78 cards of the tarot are, and then of course taking that deeper approach, understanding a little bit more about depth psychology, about the archetypal tarot techniques, and really just giving you those strong foundations so that you can jumpstart your own journey with the cards. If you've ever heard of my Archetypal Tarot School, which is another offering I have, which is a pretty popular one, this is a little bit different in that this is really geared towards that beginner. So if you've just gotten a deck or you've just started, you kind of know what the cards look like but don't really have them all memorized, this one's for you. If you are a little bit more of an intermediate tarotist, or you've already been studying the cards for 6 months, a year, you basically have them all memorized, you feel pretty confident in trying to work your way through a reading, the Archetypal Tarot School is the one for you. If you've been thinking about continuing your tarot journey, taking a class on the tarot, and you have more questions about really which one of these might be the best thing, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can go follow me on Instagram and DM me there. I can be a little slow, but I promise I'll get back to you. Or you can email me and connect with me, and the information for that is down in the description. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk about what is the difference between archetypal tarot and traditional tarot. Now, there's probably more than this, but I've kind of broken it down into 4 main ways that these two schools of tarot differ. Now let's talk a little bit about just what traditional tarot is. Tarot, of course, is a collection of 78 cards that people have used for about 200 years for the art of divination. But then in the early 20th century and the end of the 19th century, people started to say, wait a second, there is something very interesting, very mystical, and very profound about this deck of cards. That's when we see people like Arthur Waite and Pamela Smith create the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which I love, is my main deck. And we also see people like Aleister Crowley make the Thoth deck. And so this is really when we get the deck being used for still divination, but then something a little bit more. When we would pull a card, the card would give us a directive. It would tell us something to do, or it would tell us something that's going on that we maybe don't know about. So for example, pulling something like the 7 of Swords might make us think that there's a betrayal happening that we can't see. Or if we pulled something like the 4 of Swords, we might think, okay, yeah, I should go take a break, take a rest. These meanings, while there were definitely these esoteric principles attached to them, were interpreted in this standard way of understanding what is it saying about your life, what is it saying is going on, what is it saying you should do, or what's going to happen. But then in the 90s, something starts to change. We have the work of tarot scholars such as Rachel Pollack with her 78 Degrees of Wisdom coming out that tells us there's a lot more to these cards than we've been discussing. These are not new ideas to the world. They were already talking about these esoteric principles in the cards, but they weren't necessarily telling us how to apply them in a reading. How do we use the tarot in a deeper way? How do we use the tarot for self-reflection? We also see in the late 70s, the 80s, the 90s, other books come out that are connecting the tarot to other kind of schools of thought, One of those schools of thought, of course, because you're here on this channel, what else would I talk about, is Jungian thought, Jungian analysis. Sally Nichols, who is definitely a tarot author you should read, wrote the book Tarot and Jung, and she talked all about how to connect the tarot cards to this extraordinary kind of field of Jungian psychology, depth psychology. And so this again was a new idea of how do we use the cards not only for self-reflection, not only to divine our futures, but to get at the real depth and nuance and potency of our own psyches. And that's what archetypal tarot is. So I am an archetypal tarotist. I may be one of the first people to kind of put that title right over my face. But archetypal tarot is not something I created myself. It's something that has been active for 30 years. Oh my God. I just realized I totally did the millennial thing of thinking that when I said 30 years, that was 1970. That was not 1970. Oh my God. So what I've done in my work, in my scholarship, is that I've taken a lot of the ideas that already were in existence by writers like Sally Nichols, Irene Gadd, Rose Quain, Karen Homaker-Zondag, and of course Rachel Pollack and Mary Greer. I kind of collected all of these ideas and also developed my own to create what I call the archetypal tarot approach. So this is a formula of approaching the cards not just for self-reflection, but for that deep work of exploring the psyche using the symbols and archetypes that are present in the cards. So let's go through these 4 ways that traditional tarot and archetypal tarot are really different to kind of flesh out this picture of what it means to study archetypal tarot or read through that lens. So the first way that they differ is in the types of questions we come to our deck with. Now, there is a kind of rule that we hear a lot in the tarot community that the more specific your question, the more accuracy you're gonna get from your reading. And yes, if you're reading purely for divination, if you're asking a question like, am I gonna find the gal right for me? Then probably you want that specificity. But when we're using an archetypal tarot approach, specificity is not our friend. Not in our questions, at least. When we ask specific questions and practical questions, questions that engage the what, when, where, how, then we are trying to get at these definitive answers that come from some kind of external oracle. There's some kind of source that says, here, boom, there's your answer, I'm telling you. And this leaves no room for self-exploration. It leaves no room to ask ourselves questions about who we are and the deeper motivations going on inside of us. So when we come to our decks with our questions in archetypal tarot are always formed around the why. So traditional questions we might come to our decks with are, when am I gonna meet the love of my life? Or am I gonna get that promotion? These are questions that are predictive, right? We want to know, is this gonna happen? When is it gonna happen? Give me the details. In archetypal tarot, instead of asking, when am I gonna meet the love of my life? We're going to ask something like, what is this longing in me for connection? How do I support that path and following that through and finding this thing I really deeply need? So therefore, we're taking away that predictive element. We're taking away that kind of weight of needing to say, it's gonna happen in 6 months, babe, don't worry. Instead, we're exploring ourselves. The need for connection is real. What is the archetype beneath that for us? What is the deeper longing? Maybe there's a part of that that's already present in us that we can develop and feel comfort in. The way I like to think about it, honestly, is that we don't really even want answers of our cards. And I know, that sounds like the absolute worst thing for a tarot reader to say. The reason we don't want answers is that answers are a period. They're a full stop. They tell us, this is what's going on, this is what's gonna happen, this is the reason, end of story. And there is no end of story. We're always trying to find a better mirror, a deeper understanding. So we want to allow room for new possibilities, for deeper probing of ourselves. So we want to leave our questions always open-ended. The more open-ended our questions, the more room there is for developing our interpretive skill and for following the clarity of our intuition. So if we give ourselves that opportunity to do that discovery and to feel that intuitive sureness, We're really going to feel clear about who we are in this moment, what it is that we want, and what's right for our path forward. Number 2 is that we're going to go beyond the traditional interpretations. Now, I really like having traditional interpretations with the cards, meaning like I like to have a set of meanings and keywords for the 78 cards. But we're not just going to stop with these traditional meanings, right? Seeing the 6 of Cups, for example, and knowing that a keyword for it is nostalgia, like just doesn't feel like enough. When we're always reflecting the cards back on our psyche, on the depths of our soul, we need to take it deeper. So we might say the 6 of Cups represents our feeling function, that part of us that knows what it most values and loves. So the 6 looks backwards into childhood. And so that card might say, yeah, there's nostalgia here, there's a need to remember something, but what we're remembering is that deep sense of subjective value that has always been present within you. Seeing the sun, for example, and thinking of it as optimism, or seeing the hangman and just having this phrase of like, let go. These are just too simple for me. I want to take everything into that archetypal layer. And so seeing the sun, I'm not gonna only stop at optimism. I'm gonna wonder what is illuminated in me, what is enjoying this brightness and this enthusiasm of consciousness. Or looking at the hangman, what is needing to be sacrificed? Where have I lost control and where do I need to surrender to that experience? We can always bring it to this deeper level and question, what is this archetype constellated in me right now? Now you might be thinking, well, but like, how do I take those meanings deeper? Like I need a reference or a resource to understand that. And yeah, I get it. It's not just something that you figure out immediately. I think when you study a bit of depth psychology or you study archetypes, these sorts of things will naturally develop in you and you'll start to understand how to see things deeper organically. But this is what I teach in my classes. So if you know that you have wanted to take those meanings deeper and develop them and figure out how they connect to psyche, then I have resources for you, and you might want to check out the Foundations of the Tarot workshop if you're a beginner, or you might want to check out the Archetypal Tarot School if you're a little bit more intermediate, you've been working with the cards a little bit. So there's stuff out there for you, and again, it's all in the description, so you might want to check it out. Moving on to number 3, we've kind of already talked about this, but it's very foundational to understanding the tarot archetypally. Rather than thinking of the tarot as a tool of divination, we want to think of it as a tool of individuation. Individuation is this term we get from Carl Jung, which means this process of self-becoming, of self-actualization, becoming an individual. In this process, we are meeting our shadow. We are integrating the parts of ourselves we've rejected. We're understanding our complexes. We're approaching wholeness, the entirety of who we are, our soul, into one being that we get to be present with all the time. And so divination and individuation are very different ideas, but they're actually kind of linked at the same time. Divination is a term we get from Latin, divinare, which means to be inspired by a god. And so the idea is that we are contacting a god. We are interacting with some kind of divine knowledge that'll give us information to tell us what we need to do. When we think of the tarot as a tool of individuation, the gods that we're contacting are not some outside oracle that has all the answers for us, but the inner gods, the archetypes, the inner voices that have the wisdom we're really looking for. So when we pull cards and we know that the cards that we pull are helping us understand our individuation or helping us further ourselves along in that process, we're never just gonna get stuck again in that idea of the cards giving us an answer or telling us what to do or just giving us clarity and we can move on. We're always remembering that they're opening us to some kind of truth that we're not seeing or that we have the possibility, opportunity to integrate. So then we can see the cards that we pull as appearing through this sort of synchronistic magic rather than just being kind of thrown at us by some external oracle. And I have an entire video for you on synchronicity and magic, and you should watch it now, so it's there. But just having this perspective, just approaching the cards with this lens of I've pulled 3 cards rather than saying I'm divining what's next for me, saying I am giving myself a way to reflect on where I am in my individuation. It is such a different experience, and I highly recommend next time you pull some cards, just tell yourself that. I'm pulling these cards and it's not about telling me what's going on or what I should do. It's about seeing where I am in this process of individuation and how to support myself through it. Okay, so the last one, number 4, is that the process really only starts after you put the cards back in the deck. This one is a surprise probably too. Generally with traditional reading, we pull the cards, we look at them, we think about them, maybe we journal through them, we put them back in the deck, and we move on with our day. And then probably you're gonna pull cards again tomorrow and every day, and you're just gonna pull cards and cards and cards and cards and cards and completely inundate yourself. And can you tell that I have a problem with this? I am of the belief that we should approach the tarot the way we would a sacrament. And yes, that is my inner Catholic kid showing. I'm unabashed in flaunting it sometimes. But on Sundays, when you go to church and you take the communion, you take the sacrament, the idea is that this happens once a week. It's a holy moment, it's a precious moment, be present for it. And I think of the tarot in much the same way. When we come to the cards, we need to be present, we need to be ready, and it is a holy moment of connection with ourselves. So when we pull cards every day, or at least like 5 cards every day, we are bombarding ourselves with material that we can't possibly allow ourselves the opportunity and time to process. Now, this is not saying a card a day can't be a beautiful practice. It totally can, but I like to, just my recommendation generally is that I like to pull 2 cards a week. When I tell my tarot students that, and that's their homework for like the length of the class they're in with me, they're like, I can always see their eyes get big and they're like, what do you mean a week? I kind of really enjoy it. The reason is we want to give ourselves time to process, contemplate, and do the work. In Archetypal Tarot, the process starts when we put the cards back in the deck, because that's when we can actually start to follow through what they've illuminated for us. So after you've pulled your cards, you do your journaling, you do your immediate reflection, maybe something really interesting comes through right away. Maybe you're like, okay, I kind of get it, or there's this one card that's bugging me, I don't really know what it's about, and you leave it alone. Then you're gonna continue the process. You're gonna follow it through with shadow work, dream work, using active imagination, using the archetypal tarot techniques that I've developed. And those techniques, by the way, are only available when you are a student of mine. So if you go looking through my past YouTube videos for those techniques, you're probably not gonna find them. But I do have a video on active imagination with the tarot, which is here. So that is definitely worth checking out. This is a day of just pointing to all my old videos. I'm like realizing how much content I have out there. When did I find the time? My oh my. And this process can go on for a day or weeks or months. It can go on a really long time. They are showing us these depths. They're showing us these truths that we don't have conscious understanding around yet, or not clear understanding around yet. And so it's the same kind of feeling of there's something about it, I don't quite get it, I need to sit with it and let it develop on its own time. There's so many possibilities for continuing to work with the cards, but I encourage you to continue to work with them. This does not mean you need to exhaust yourself and that it has to happen every day. When I pull cards for myself, I will maybe return to it a week later and sit with it for 20 minutes, and maybe a month later return to it and sit with it for another 20 minutes. But we want to give ourselves time to process and to let the unconscious speak through the symbols of the cards to our conscious understanding of what's going on for us. This was just my little summary of the main differences between archetypal tarot and traditional tarot. You've probably noticed there is definitely some overlap. In traditional tarot, more and more we are thinking of it as a mode of self-reflection, but archetypal tarot just takes that a step deeper and really engages the psyche in a more focused way. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're interested in the Foundations of Tarot workshop, again, there's still a couple weeks left to join that, so definitely check that out in the description. If you aren't already following me on Instagram, go do that. And if you're not subscribed here, I hope you do that too. And it's really so great to kind of jump back into this again. Thanks everybody for sticking around if you have. And I hope to see you in another video quite soon. Have a beautiful, meaningful day. I'm so old. That is so bad. So bad.